Hi, everyone. We're back again for another Wine Wednesday. So today is a special Wine Wednesday. We decided we would do an interview. And the interview is with Rennie, who is a longtime member of the club, actually, which is great. He's been a member since 1994, and he is the founder and owner of Rennie Estate Winery in Beamsville. So thank you for being on the call, Graham. We're excited to talk about your winery and your wines and all of that. So, well, I guess I'll start off by saying, as you can see, I have one of your wines here. So it's the 2014 Scarpata, which is awesome. So it's a Cabernet, right? And it's in a Passamento style?
Ripasso style wine, actually.
Ripasso style wine. Okay. So, I mean, it's an excellent wine right off the bat, which, you know, I just told you when I poured it in the glass, I got a ton of aroma. You know, I get kind of these, you know, like chocolatey notes. I get kind of a good mix of, you know, dried fruit, but also fresh fruit at the same time, which is, you know, a call sign of Ripasso style wine. So very, very interesting. I've tried a lot of your other wines as well. So I've always been very impressed by them. So I thought it would be a great thing to do an interview with you today.
So my first one, so.
Yeah, exactly. The first question I'd like to ask you, I mean, you have a beautiful property there, which is actually in your background, correct, in your painting. So this is a view of your vineyard from your estate house?
That's right. This is the artist who painted this was sitting here on where I am now currently sitting in the main house. This is back in 2002 when we just had a guest house on the property, and she left a note saying, could I paint your property? And so she sat right here with the view that I have through this window in front of me and what you're seeing back here. And this is her interpretation of the vineyard. You don't see right across the lake there. What she didn't put in was the beautiful city of Toronto and the CN Tower and, you know, the needle that we see every night. You can't see that, but you get a sense of the topography, and actually some of these, you know, they're all important parts of the whole terroir that we have here at Heron Pond Vineyard.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful property. So that actually leads me to my first question. How did you find the property, and you know, what kind of things were you looking for? And then when you found the property, what was so special about the terroir that prompted you to buy and start planting and growing grapes?
So Christine and I, my wife, we traveled a fair bit to many vineyard sites around the planet. You know, been to France, Italy, California, and like a lot of people, always thought that having, you know, being or living on a vineyard would be the coolest thing. And we were living in Oakville, and just by happenstance and good fortune, you have this amazing wine region just you know, 40 minutes from Oakville and right around the lake. So we were coming down here regularly, looking at you know, tasting wines and enjoying the local experience. And we just started talking about, wouldn't it be great to own a vineyard down here? And this was back in we started talking in 1996, 97. And so we hired a real estate agent. And we got to meet a lot of the owners of different wine. Len Penticetti, who owns Cave Spring, well-known entrepreneur down here, was really a good mentor for us and put us on the right track. And so we kind of knew where the best viticultural areas were here in the Beamsville, Jordan area. And then this site, his family had been looking at it. It's a 50-acre site, had been a vineyard in the 60s, one of the first operating vineyards in the early 60s. And wow. The farmer who owned it had really go downhill, and it was in a pretty bad state. So we bought it and said, we knew it was a great site because there were a number of interested parties, many of them who were winery owners. So we just basically came in and gave the farmer what he was looking for, price-wise, and then ended up you know, hiring a whole bunch of specialists to come in and help us develop this beautiful site into the vineyard that it is today.
That's amazing. So the wine business in general, what kind of prompted you to get interested in wine? Was your family always kind of into wine, and did you just grow a passion through, obviously taste testing and and drinking wine, or kind of where did that inspiration come from?
I think probably like many people, just the experience with wine, enjoying wines, finding it to be part of your lifestyle. But really, there was a trip in 1982 I took down to California with one of my then business partners, and he was really a big California aficionado, and I didn't know much about California wines, and I just was totally knocked out by the whole experience hanging out with him. He knew a whole bunch of winery owners, and so we kind of got the insider's tour, and that really, I think, set the clock for me. But it was in 1999, no, maybe later than that. Let me think about this. It was probably in sometime in the 2000s, where we were in Italy, Christina and I, and we were guests of, there's a very significant Amarone producer called Massi that I'm sure you know of, MAS,
Yes.
on everyone's wine list. And so the Boscaini family owned the Massi winery, and we were introduced to a number of wineries in Italy from a friend of mine who was chairman of the LCBO, and we stayed on their property, and we again got the insider's tour of their facility and how they made Amarone wine, which I love. And Andrea Del Sin, their winemaker, became a buddy. And I walked away from that experience saying, I think we could do this with our own fruit. And I'd always, now we had been into this for about 10 years. We've been selling all of our fruit to other wineries. And I knew that the wines that were being produced from our vineyard were very, very good. And I just thought maybe I could take it up a notch, and I could do something really special with the Bordeaux varietals that tend to be the hardest wines to make for your friends at the Mississauga Golf and Country Club. I love the big California cabs, the big Barolos, the Tuscan wines, California cab style wines. Very tough to make that style of wine when you're in a cool climate, viticultural region like Ontario. So I thought we could maybe use this long-term process used by the folks in Valpolicella in Italy, bring it here, customize it for our own purposes, and use my fruit to make some Passimento wines. So that was kind of the fire that got lit after that trip. So that would have been around 2009, actually, because my first vintage was 2010.
Okay, that's amazing. So that kind of leads us to talk about your lineup of wines. So, I mean, you can probably start with the Scarpata, which I have, and then, what other wines do you have, and what kind of methods do you use to make those wines?
So the Scarpata is part of the Appassimento family of wines that we make. So maybe what I'll do, if it's okay, there's really two different varietals. We have major varietals on our property. We have the Burgundian variety, and we have the Bordeaux varietals. The Burgundian varietals are Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And with those two wines...
And your Chardonnay is amazing, by the way.
Chardonnay, right? And the way I look at producing those wines is really to capture the essence of the vineyard in a glass with very little manipulation. So it's, very, very significant cropping levels to get your fruit cost, to get your volume down, and your concentration of flavors in the grapes up. Hand harvest the fruit, bring it to the winery. It's whole. It's only wild yeast, whole bunch fermented, and it's unfiltered at the end of the day, and barrel aged. Malolactic fermentation occurs in the barrel. These are all the things you do when you're a small artisanal winery that you can do. And this creates a fairly full-bodied, creamy, beautiful, what I'll call California style Chardonnay from a cool climate viticultural region. And our Pinot Noir is, again, it's a Burgundian style wine, all wild yeast, unfiltered, and really just an expression of, if you came and tasted the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay in, let's say, October before we harvested, and then had a glass of that wine, you would get the connections. So that's the two Burgundian style wines. On the Bordeaux varietals, those are the hardest ones to turn into really big, full-bodied wines when you have such a short growing season here. And you know how cool it's been so far this year. It's nice and warm today, but
Yeah.
it's been really cool. This is pretty typical. So you just don't get that amazing ripening that you get in California.
They tend to be kind of tart. Some people will even say they're sour, right? They're not as approachable as a California wine.
Highly tannic. You need a lot of years to age them, which is what the French have done a great job of educating us, to buy the futures, put up the money, lay the wine down for years and drink it. But most people we know want to buy it and drink it this week. So the passimento process really allows you to create that beautiful, voluptuous, big, full-bodied wine from Ontario. It just requires an extra step, and that step is you grow the best fruit you can on the vineyard. In my case, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc. You wait until it's fully ripened. You bring it to the winery, and instead of pressing it and making wine right away, you actually then put it into, in my case, a proprietary drying chamber that I created with Vineland Research and Innovation here. That takes about 80 to 100 days to what we'll call raisinate the grapes, dry the grapes very, very slowly. And you get a number of phenolic changes within the grape as it dries slowly like that. And so I bring those grapes into the winery in January, and I then ferment them. And I use a special blend of Tuscan and Zinfandel yeasts to kickstart the process. And we make these, at the end of the day, I've got three tanks of full Passimento, Cab Sauv, Cab Franc, and Merlot wines. And to make my G wine, which I'll talk about before Scarpata, I simply drain each of those tanks by opening the spigots, and I only take the free run juice from those tanks, and they go into barrel and they sit for 24 months in the cellar. But what's left at the bottom of those tanks are a ton of skins and quite a bit of juice still, because I haven't pressed anything. I add some Cabernet Sauvignon that I made that fall, that's been sitting in a tank. I add it to the skins, let a second fermentation occur, and it lifts the alcohol level and the flavor profile of that Cab Sauv. And then I press those skins and the lees into that wine, and that's what's a traditional ripasso is, repassing the wine over the skins, and that's my Scarpata. So Scarpata is really kind of Cabernet Sauvignon squared, I call it, because it's got a little extra.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I've made, so those are always available at the winery. And then I make one other wine called Super G, which a lot of friends of mine at the club will know of, and a lot of guys in the Brighton will know of. And what I do is I cherry pick in really good years a couple of from that full Passimento Cabernet Sauvignon wine that's in the cellar. If I can identify 2 barrels that are just so exceptional, I'll pull them out of the mix, and I'll basically just bottle a pure 100% Cabernet Sauvignon Passimento wine. I call it Super G. And in 2016, which was a very warm summer, beautiful growing summer, one of the best we've had in 20 years, the Cabernet Franc, that was our Passimento Cabernet Franc for the G blend, there was a couple of barrels that were just so exceptional. I thought I had to make a special wine, so I made a wine called the Colleen, which is truly an outstanding expression of Cab Franc. I don't particularly like Cab Franc as a wine.
Me either. Yeah.
Cab Sauv you probably don't like, but this is so exceptional. It's created a totally new benchmark down here, I think, for Cab Franc. And and then I can play around like for this 2000. We're bottling the 2018s in August, so I'm kind of 2 years behind vintage, and we are just tasting right through a new wine that I've made, a double Ripasso with a little bit of a kicker from a full Passimento. I'm calling it after my son Evan's Alchemy. So those are the kind of things you can do when you're just making wine for friends and a small group of clients, And of course, then you're not making any money, because as you know, if you want to make a small fortune in this business, you start with a large one.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, very true. So everything that you're saying, me as a wine nerd, I love it. And I know how much more expensive, I guess, it is to create wine in the way that you're doing it. And I think it's really cool that you're doing all of these different things with wine, right? And you're experimenting, and just the fact that you only make the Super G on good vintages. That's really
Right.
cool, and that's you obviously have a passion for it. But your wines do tend to be a little more expensive, right? They are considered ultra premium, so they're at the top end of the spectrum in terms of pricing in Niagara. So they're ranging from the $50 mark to about the $130 mark. So what can you just explain to everyone who doesn't understand, what happens to your yields when you press when they're dry already, why that's so much more expensive, and then what else do you do to add value to your wines and create that ultra premium wine that everyone's looking for?
That's a great question, by the way. I think because a lot of people do say, how come, wines in Ontario are expensive? Never mind just Graham Rennie's wines, but generally across the world, Ontario wines can be seen as expensive. And I think it comes down to just a whole bunch of things. In my case, it's, at the end of the day, everything I do is a function of what's happening in our vineyard. So we start every vine, grape is kind of hand touched by somebody in the process over the course of the summer. There's a lot of manual labor that goes into managing our vineyard. Like we have a crew here today, 40 people, and they're in and out every couple of days, and it's constant. And it's just pure cost, right? And you don't have to spend that kind of money. You don't have to do all the shoot thinning. You don't have to do leaf thinning later on to allow the grapes to get more sunlight. You don't have to do cropping, which drops easily 30% of my fruit right on the floor, right? But I want to concentrate the flavor. So, at the end of the day, I'm down to 2.5 tons per acre versus if I let the vine do its thing, it would grow 6 tons. And I could make a lot of wine with 6 tons, but I only have 2.5 tons. And then on the Appassimento side, I take those grapes to the drying room and I lose another 35% on my volume. Just So, you're seeing all of your fixed costs every year in the vineyard and all the variables that go with it. And at the end of the day, you have a very little bit of fruit left to make wine with. And then you have just today, I was talking to Shiraz, our winemaker, about ordering a couple of new barrels for our Chardonnay 2020. And, it's with the dollar being where it is, I think it's about $1,600 now for a barrel that I get to use 3 times. You have just incredible amounts of costs throughout the whole process that ultimately get reflected in the price. And hopefully the quality is there, right? Relative to expensive Italian wines, top Barolos, top Amarones, top California Cabs, I think my wine prices are pretty good. Relative to, going to Sobeys or going to some grocery store, you're going to find a lot of decent wine there for $10, $12. So yeah, expensive relative to those wines, but it's a totally different process. Here you can be assured that you're drinking the wine that you're drinking. If you're to drink Scarpata every year, it's not going to change that much. You're going to taste the vineyard every time you're into one of those glasses. I don't know if that's a great answer, but
it's an excellent answer. And I think, a lot of people they just don't understand why wine is so expensive. And when you explain it like that, saying, when you're pressing those grapes and they're dried already, so you're getting 30% less. And so that kind of explains why they're so expensive. And then obviously you put a lot of extra effort into how you make your wines, and, that creates a totally different level of wine, really. So it justifies your pricing, right? People will pay for it because they know they're getting quality.
And maybe the last thing here, Christine, is very small lots. I'm only making 700 cases a year. So there's not much of it. I sell all of it every year. So people are buying it.
That's great.
I'm drinking my fair share as well. So
me too.
I hope that people that enjoy it can afford it. And if they can't, they should come and talk to me. We'll work a deal.
Love it. That's awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I think this was a great interview, and just the day in the life of a winery owner. And thank you so much.